Ladies and gentlemen, we've been living in some interesting economic times lately, and stories are surfacing of lesser known causes of the financial corruption and disasters that we see all around us these days. Josh Hamilton is a graduate of Queen's University, Belfast, and who founded The Gist and is a host of the podcast called Chatter, an interview podcast covering politics, culture, and the future. But mainly what we're going to be talking about today is his book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, which is his first book, and it's a case study of how social media is disrupting our democracy. And at present, he's also writing a book called To the Moon, The GameStop Saga. If you've seen on Netflix, Eat the Rich, it's also the GameStop Saga. This is a very interesting and very telling financial situation that we have in our world today. I'm really excited to get Josh Hamilton in here. So let's get him in here on the Ben Stewart Podcast. Josh, my man, how you doing?
Hello. Nice to be here.
Where are you hailing from?
From London.
From London. Okay. Right on. So as I said in the introduction, the book about Brexit, our audience definitely knows what this is, but I want to break this down a little bit. And why did you find this important as your first book? So you can kind of give a little bit of context of who you are and what got you there. But what was it about Brexit specifically that you found important to make this your leading book?
Well, when was it? 2016, we voted to leave the European Union, and I was not particularly pleased about the vote. The more I looked into it, and the more I was sort of becoming aware of the way in which social media, big tech, and then artificial intelligence as well was being used to run a lot of political advertising to target certain people in what I believe to be predatory ways, especially since they were using a lot of sort of dark ads, or what was known as dark ads on Facebook, where they would be going out and people would just not. No one was monitoring anything that was being posted on these ads that were being paid for through like legitimate political institutions. There was a lot of questions about where the money was actually coming from, but my real problem was the fact that there was zero regulation on political advertising whatsoever. Because I know in America it's a little different, but in Britain at least, like we have very strict regulations on like what you can say on TV, on in terms of like political ads, what you can say in terms of advertising, basically on TV, generally on radio, in print, all other forms of media. And yet there was this like absolute wild west of social media where people could just say anything. And I was becoming really concerned that people were not understanding the power that this had in the ability to shape the vote, basically. And in order to, especially when you get to like really tight elections, like Brexit was a very, very tight vote. It wasn't just that I was looking at it from a perspective of someone who wanted to remain in the European Union, because especially throughout the process of writing the book, I kind of came around a little bit to the idea of not wanting to be a part of the European Union, and I found myself understanding far better the arguments that were being used by the Brexiteers, and also realizing that there was this massive gulf between what the people who voted for it wanted and what the politicians who were campaigning for it wanted. And I realized that what the people wanted was to essentially like take back control. That was the big slogan that was used for it, and people sort of dismissed it as being rubbish. And I read this fantastic book by a guy called David Goodhart, and basically he postulated that the main divide in modern politics, on both sides of the Atlantic as well, and then across most of the developed world, this isn't like a UK specific phenomenon, was basically between these two categories of people, like somewheres and anywheres. And whilst he says that nobody exactly fits perfectly into either of these categories, that he felt that this was the thing that was producing the kind of like urban rural divide and this young versus old divide that we see in politics. And he basically defined the somewheres as people who they grew up in somewhere, they decided to then left school, they got a job there, they settled down, they had roots in this place, and they felt connected to somewhere. And he defined the anywhere essentially as people who had, like, for example, left whatever town or city they'd grown up in, they'd gone to a new place, they'd gone to university, they'd met a whole bunch of friends from all around the world, and they were very it was like the kind of definition of the modern progressive liberalism, like just people coming from anywhere around the world to you know just have like similar ideas about freedom of movement and just openness generally and progressive, and none of those things are bad. Like I definitely fall into the second category 100%. But I started to realize that the thing that people were hearkening back to in the Brexit vote, and I think in the Trump vote as well, was this. It's like a rejection of the modernity of the world that we currently live in, the sort of disconnect from a place that I think really defines a lot of the people who feel like, oh, life was better in the 60s and the 70s because they felt like they belonged somewhere.
Mm.
They felt like there was a lot more. I feel like there was probably a lot more pride and patriotism, and essentially he pointed this out, and I was just like, wow, like I think that this is what people are harkening back to, and it's not about racism or immigration, and it's not about any of these like economic issues that people are pinpointing. Like what they've done is they've identified like people's dissatisfaction with a lot of the modern world, and then instead of attempting to try and like go, okay, what are the economic factors that led to people wanting to put down roots and stay somewhere and like build a town or a city and make it their home and make it the place they want to be or make the country better. People were using this longing for a past in order to sell them a very, very extreme free market neoliberalism. And I felt that, having sort of drawn on the work of Naomi Klein in the shock doctrine, I looked at what was happening across politics in the West in the last 40 years, and I sort of identified in Britain that we'd been the victims of like a series of shocks previously that had led to massive like advancements in this like very, very extreme free market neoliberal ideology, one that had already seen like the one that already been seen in places like Latin America, Indonesia, post-Soviet Russia, in the way that the privatization waves that came through in the 80s with Thatcher and Reagan, right through to what happened with the US military and its complete privatization under Bush, and then the privatization of numerous numbers of public services in the UK after the 2008 crash. And essentially, what I thought was there is a massive exploitation of this longing and desire to harken back to a time when things sort of felt, I don't know, like more meaningful or something like that.
Maybe
And
more
that was
stable,
more stable, definitely.
understandable,
Hmm.
comprehensible. Yeah.
Comprehensible, that's definitely it as well. And I felt that was being exploited using the massive power of social media and big data to target people like really, really specifically. And I don't mean just like pumping out a bunch of ads. I mean having hundreds of variations of these ads and like testing each one in the way that like A/B testing, like all the way down to like Google, like A/B test. They were
Mhm.
A/B testing like 42 different shades of like buttons in Gmail in order to know the one that was the perfect one in order to make you click. And I watched that this technology was being exploited in order to like twist people's views and sort of pour fire on the social cleavages that were already existent. And this is why I think it was so successful in Britain and America, because we had this underlying divide. And basically, what I predicted was that with Brexit, we would see a massive shock, probably with the very like hard pro free market, like global Britain that they were pushing, and that would then like in turn be used to bring us like another wave of this neoliberalism, which is generally defined by the sale of public services, like selling off estate assets, massive deregulation, and huge tax breaks and tax cuts for the wealthiest. And I was basically very concerned that nobody else seemed to have identified that this is what was happening, and was like, well, can I swear on this show?
Yeah, come on.
Okay, fuck it, I'll do it myself. So
That's the
that's basically
mentality.
why I wrote the book.
So, for the audience's sake, if you could maybe just super simplify, like, what was it from your perspective there? Like, what's the big deal about leaving the European Union? And, like, what was it that you saw that you would actually prefer to stay in the European Union? And then I want to kind of tease apart, like, the main premise of the book, because it seems like like Brexit was maybe the event, but the technology, the tool is really what you were mining, the social media tool, because that's huge, and obviously we see that everywhere. But in the developed countries where everyone's got the smartphone, that has been the way. So I want to mine that, but for people to just to understand the event Brexit. And this is an evolving event. I actually was just reading right before this. I didn't realize it officially happened January 30th or 31st of 2020. So that's pretty interesting timing. But go ahead for the audience, just kind of explain what was the big controversy here.
Well, essentially, it came down to this idea: take back control. In that we had in the 1970s decided we were going to join the European Union, and since then, at that point, it was basically a trading bloc, with like a small amount of political oversight, influence, and then through numerous renegotiations, treaties, adding new countries, its scope basically has massively expanded to being encompassing 27 different countries. And the idea was basically, why are we taking rules from this body to whom, okay, we elect European members of parliament, but you don't have that much say. The European Parliament isn't like the be all and end all. There's numerous different like institutional bodies that exist, packed with a bunch of career politicians, and there's an incredible amount of lobbying that goes on at the European level as well. And the argument basically went, why do we have this body dictating to us? Why are we not in charge of our own laws, basically?
What was the
And that was the
benefit? I'm sorry to jump in, but like,
Mhm.
what was the benefit to these countries for joining the European Union, which was, I think, the European Committee or something? It had a different name back in
Mm.
'73.
Yeah, it was the European Community.
Community.
So basically, the benefit is we get free trade between all of the countries, free movement of goods, services, capital, and people, and essentially it was just like harmonizing across Europe, the idea of trade, and it's fantastic. Like, don't I may not be particularly happy about like the power of the overarching structure, but like if you've ever been to Europe and you just zoom between all the different countries, no checks, no borders, like
Yeah, it's
it's
smooth.
wonderful. And the euro, especially when it came along, seemed like a great idea. Everyone just using the same currency. And I would have very much bought that at the time. And then also what it was also like a liberal, progressive, like forward-looking group of countries as well. Like, there's a lot of protections that we have lost, and are probably going to continue to lose, because of losing the Europe, because of leaving the European Union. Things like workers' rights, consumer protections, environmental protections on like water quality. There's an endless list of things that we're probably going to lose now because of having left the European Union. Now,
Mm.
the argument that I continue to make to all of the, like, because I have this argument with people so much. The argument I continue to make is like, those regulations were fantastic, but there is nothing about leaving the European Union that prevents us from continuing to have those protections. It is based on the government we elect. You know,
Mm.
it would be like leaving NAFTA, and then some of the trade benefits, or the I don't know what would disappear with NAFTA. I don't know it well enough, but like, you lose some of those, and then but there's nothing to stop you still having all the same like laws and things. You just leave that like international body, but it's then your decision again. And that was the case being made. I was concerned. The reason I voted to remain, the reason I wrote the book, is because I watched the politicians pushing for this very extreme deregulatory free market in like free market style of politics that they were going to push for. And I'm not like an anti-capitalist like person. I'm not like a we need communism again sort of person. But like what they're pushing is not free market capitalism. What they're pushing is a very, very corrupted version of capitalism that is just like cronyism. It's a state sponsored oligarchy, and we witnessed it happen through the pandemic. Like, I didn't predict the pandemic. I predicted a shock that would allow them to hand massive amounts of money to their friends and donors. And we got that, and they handed billions and billions and billions of pounds to their friends and donors to provide any kind of COVID related contract that they could like get their hands on. Like brothers and friends of like the health secretary were getting contracts to provide PPE. Like, people who had never ever provided like things like that in their lives were getting millions of pounds. It was
Wow.
disgusting. And that's basically what I foresaw happening, not in the context of COVID, but I foresaw that being the way it went, and that's why I wanted to remain, and that's why I wrote the book, basically.
It is it is interesting because like I was just having a chat with some individual out here about like, really is what we have capitalism here in the States? Is what we have capitalism? Is it a free market? Is that really what decides? We have the Federal Reserve over here, of which I know you're familiar, because of our Federal Reserve and most currencies being pegged to the dollar. There's a lot of our inflation that we get to export if we want to, keep interest rates low. And so it's interesting to ask that question, like, where do we have the real ideal of what capitalism and the free market was supposed to be? But instead of asking you that question, it was interesting that you mentioned Trump, because obviously it was roughly the same time. And obviously him getting elected, regardless of what you believe, whether it was legitimate or not, I don't even go down that rabbit hole. The social media side of things, the way that it really helped with that election and will just continue to do so unchecked until something big happens.
Mm.
What were some of the parallels that you saw between Brexit? Because you mentioned like it was very similar to Trump, the rise of what that became here. Because it's not just Trump; it's a whole phenomena. It's MAGA. It's endless CNN stories. It's this really interesting collective psychological event that happened here. I would love to hear your thoughts on, especially from the social media angle, like how were there similarities between Brexit and Trump here?
So I think thankfully we don't quite have anything quite as horrifying as CNN in the UK. But in terms of like the similarities I saw, like first off, I think there's that same like urban, rural, young, old, like anywhere, somewhere divide that exists in America. I think it's very clear. When you look at the electoral map, you can very clearly see it. Especially when you go down like to like a precinct, that you can see is like central cities, like blue as fuck. And then you get it just gets like maybe a little purple on the outside, and then it's just red. Like, it's wild, like how like clear that divide is. So there's that, and then there's the way in which like social media it amplifies, I believe, like all hatred and arguments and And it seems to stir up things and turn them into this really binary fucking argument that's just people fighting because it's their tribe. And that's exactly what happened during Brexit, and that's exactly what happened during Trump. It's not like people couldn't look in the same way at Brexit. They'd just be like, oh well, we're Britain, it'll be fine. We just keep calm and carry on. And we won the war, we beat the Nazis, we'll do it. And it's the same thing you see with the pure like absolute like Trump heads. They're just like, yeah, well, we're gonna make America great again. Like it's that same patriotism, but then they can't look at that and go, okay, Trump might be the thing that's great and rejects what we don't want, but there's like no criticism possible of your own side. And that's what social media, I think, just amplifies and amplifies and amplifies, because you get this thing where you start to only see the most like caricatured arguments of the other side, and that's all that people started to see, because that was the thing that was driving the engagement, especially the way the Facebook algorithm was working at the time, because that was probably the main platform on which these sorts of fights were happening at the time. Like I know Facebook's kind of drifted off to obscurity at this point, but like then that was the platform, and its algorithm really drove like hatred, like comments, engagement, and people just fought like about anything. So like no one could sit there and go, Trump's not great, maybe he's like too loudmouthed, maybe he's a bit of a loose cannon, but I prefer him to Hillary. There was no nuance. Or on the other side, there was no going, well, Hillary seems like she's a bit corrupt, and maybe she's not that qualified, or she definitely should have like not acid washed her freaking email server, because most of us would be in jail if we did shit like that. But I'm gonna vote for her because I don't like Trump and I don't like the things. Like there was no nuance. And the same thing happened in the Brexit argument. It was just like, we are Britain and we're amazing, and fuck the European Union, they've never done anything for us. Or Europe is wonderful and without flaws, and anyone that attempts to reject this is a racist, because that's where it went. And the same thing happened in America. It's like, oh, what, you're a Trump supporter? Oh, you must be a racist. The same fucking happened, and social media amplified both of those sides.
Definitely. Like the algorithm is attention seconds. Like the want, the desire of the algorithm is attention seconds. Like what keeps you on the page longer, what will get you to click through. And outrage became the norm. And that's, a super fascinating desire of a platform. So whereas in the past, like way in the past, people would stand up on a soapbox in front of a crowd of people, and those people had a desire for their own best interest, but it wasn't like the platform literally that they were standing on and talking in also had a desire to be like, wait a minute, we're going to give this person far more attention. Why? Because look at how outraged people are at him or her. And in this case, it was a him. Outrage gave as much as CNN claims to hate this individual, what he did for the ratings, what you could tell that CNN, they didn't mind that conflict of interest. Like, we hate them, so we are going to talk about them 24/7 years after he's out of office, and now it's coming back up. I guess the interesting thing for me is really taking a look at. I was listening to, I think it was a talk, in San Francisco by Ezra Klein, and he had just written a book. I'm not sure what it was, but he was talking about
the polarization one.
Yeah. So one of the things that he said in his talk, though, that I found very interesting was like, I think one thing that we're noticing a lot more is people that are stocking all of their philosophies, their ideologies, what their beliefs, what they desire and what they value on one side of a political aisle, because that's how that is fed to us through the algorithms, is everything is on one side. It becomes a lot more polarized in that respect. But he also said, I think when the lady asked him, like, what could help? And he said, I want to see people engaging in conversations across the party lines in a way that shows that we care what it is you're losing. Like, okay, we won the election, you lost the election, but now here's the recourse. We won, but we want to know, like what is it that you're losing? What is it that you feel like you're losing? And the main point is something that I think you were talking about with the somewheres and the anywheres, is this idea that there's this core, and I think it works perfectly in the conservative category, because if you're conservative, there's something that you're protecting. If you're liberal or progressive, you're moving forward. When you're moving forward at speed, you're literally not trying to conserve. You're on the hunt for something. But there's something that the conservatives seem to feel like is changing so rapidly, that like my father, growing up with 5 channels and a rotary phone, now looking at this world, and he's still in voting age, and he's looking around like, holy shit, everything is changing. This is not the world I expected. It's moving so fast that I feel like all of it feels like it could be a violation, if not just very scary. And what am I supposed to do with that feeling? Am I just supposed to be like, well, this is the future, I'm just going to shut the fuck up because I'm an old cat now and new cats are taking over? That's kind of what I think Trump, and particularly in Brexit, there was an element of that as well. As like Trump got up and he spoke what many people were thinking but not saying. And you could say what you like or don't like about this individual. I personally, I didn't vote for him. I haven't voted. I've only found one candidate I only came close to voting for, and that was Ron Paul. And that was mainly because I was like, I believe this guy isn't talking at his ass or from a script, you know? And so,
but that was the appeal of Trump as well.
Exactly. Well,
he just got
Trump
up and riffed.
Definitely wasn't reading a script. You can tell.
Stand-up comedy.
Script,
but he was
shit,
also
man.
speaking for he was using these tactics that like were very intelligent in some ways, but leading back to very base primary emotions, which is like when I forget what some presidential dinner he had steak with ketchup. And he knew that was going to get this. This is the way, at least like people like Tim Pool were saying, it's like, this is genius because he's going to get ragged on for it because it's so simple. Look at this dumb meal when half the country, especially the conservatives, they eat steak and ketchup. So that was a way of like, in a very unique way, saying like, this is the demographic I stand for. Watch all these people rag on me, not realizing that they're ragging on half of a potential or part of the swing states, any of that. So, but to me, it was driving people back into their base drives. And that's not just because that's the way Trump is, or that's the way, those in Europe are. It's the algorithms. So I really want to dive deeper in. I know that was like kind of a long segue back into the social media side of things.
Yeah, before we go to the social media, do you mind if I just tell you what I think would help?
Yeah,
because I think Ezra Klein is wrong, and I used to be a really big fan of his. I haven't he lost me a little bit in some of his coverage. And do you know what it is?
Why?
I believe that there's a very monstrous, substantial portion of both sides of this tribal divide that we have that have no understanding whatsoever of what the other side is saying. Like none. Like they have literally like no, and they have no desire to understand. They want to hate them, or they want to believe that they're like bad people or something like that. Like it's stunning to me, actually.
Intentionally divisive? Is that what you're saying?
I don't even know if it's intentionally divisive. It's like, do you know the one, and this is like hyper controversial, the one that like I think illustrates it best is the abortion debate, right? Not even Roe v. Wade, but literally about abortion, like pro-life versus pro-choice. And the people on the right who are pro-life, they literally believe that you're murdering babies. Like they think you're murdering a human life, right? And if the liberals who are like, oh, you just want to control women's bodies, could get their head around the fact that they think that you're murdering a human life, they would think so much. I believe they would think so much differently about the people that are opposing them. It's like no one understands the argument that the other side is making on nearly every single issue, and they have no desire to. If they tried to just take 30 seconds and be like, why do they want this? And not assume the worst. And just even ask them, what is it that you don't like about this policy? It's not even about what you're losing. That's where I think Ezra Klein's wrong. Because I think he's kind of viewing it in a way that people feel like they've lost control of their world. And there's definitely a sense to which that's right. But I think it's a lack of understanding about what the other side is about. And it both sides are guilty of this. It's not, I don't think it's more prevalent on one side or the other. But I think that's what it is. I think it's a lack of understanding about the motivations for and the reasons for their opinions.
I agree. I definitely agree. And, perhaps, this isn't just to play diplomatic. Perhaps I didn't, and maybe you saw what Ezra said. Perhaps I didn't say it the clearest, just in case he watches it. I'd love him to come clear that up. But I definitely agree that we don't know what, let's say if we're in a camp, a specified camp, especially if that camp is enumerated and classified by social media, then we get this media and we don't get that media. They don't want us clicking off because like something disgusts us. They want us to look deeper because something disgusts us. So if we're going to hear the argument of the other side, we have to hear it from our camp, not from them. Most people who talk shit on Trump, they don't watch anything of Trump except for what MSNBC, CNN will tell them. And conversely, it's the same thing for Fox. If I want to know about Biden, I want to know what Tucker has to say first. I'm not going to go to CNN and watch that, because they're all liars. That definitely is an interesting thing that has been brewing for, I don't know. I wouldn't even, dream to put an origin on that. But like these kinds of like this divisiveness has been going on for quite some time. It seems like we found a technology that puts it into hyperspeed. So I would really love to know, like, maybe before we even get to a solution in that respect of what is the main. So there's the issue, the both sides, let's say of, abortion. The ones that are pro-life, they absolutely believe that the ones that are pro-choice just want to murder babies and they don't care about human life. And the ones that are pro-choice, they believe that the pro-life ones, they don't care at all about human choice. Like, we should all be automatons and programmed. And that's obviously not what either side is saying. So there's the problem. Before we get to the solution, what do you think is exacerbating it? More nuanced than just the algorithms, like who's coding the algorithms? Do these companies, are there CEOs that are just like, shit, I have to appease the woke, I have to appease the others, I have to appease all these people? Or do you think, what's your sense? Do you feel there's something deliberate about this, or this is the dynamics of empire coming to an end?
It's difficult to say it's deliberate on every angle, because there's definitely issues in which there's very deliberate like attempts to boost or de-boost. I can't think of the word, but yeah, like de-rank things that are being said. I mean, we saw it with the DHS leaks about through the pandemic, like things that were considered not acceptable to the DHS were just being like, yeah, they were having fucking meetings with Twitter. It's like, what? Or I remember watching, the reason I used to have Facebook, I deleted Facebook and Instagram because I saw the press conference with Jen Psaki where she was like, yeah, so we're talking to Facebook about who to remove and what's misinformation. I was like, whoa. I was like, that's way too far. Like the government shouldn't be getting involved in that whatsoever. But I think, and I wrote about this in the book actually, so I think that it's about these filter bubbles and echo chambers that pop up, because what happens is you get obviously you get your stuff, right? But you don't just get your stuff, right? You get your side retweeting and presenting the most extreme and, like I said before, caricatured arguments that the other side are presenting. You don't get the reasonable part. They're not retweeting the guy who's reasonably explaining the reasons for their position. You never get that. That is not the thing that goes fucking viral. Or at least that's not the thing that goes viral within the other community, or the other side of an argument. The thing that goes viral within the other side of the argument is the most extreme ones. And that's what I think is driving it within social media, is that the bubbles that we build up are like, they're not impenetrable, in the sense that it's not like we don't hear the arguments of the other side. We hear the caricatured ones, the ones that like provoke the most outrage from our, or like from our community, or from our side of whatever fucking argument it happens to be in. So I think that's what it is. And like, I've worked fucking hard on my social media to make sure I'm following as many different people from like different things. And like, sometimes I see people with extreme and stupid views, and I go in and I just poke them and I get blocked. But like today I got blocked for a, oh, there was this woman who's like clearly just very concerned about her kids, and she's constantly posting about like COVID measures in school. And she was like, she posted something about, it was like, why don't we all just eat raw chicken to get immunity from salmonella? And I was just like, I don't know, I don't believe I have to say this, but like, food poisoning is different to a respiratory illness, right? Like, there's a difference. And I got blocked. Like,
Yeah,
but
logic
like,
doesn't seem like it's welcome.
no, but like, but the point is like, when I follow loads of people who are reasonable on these issues, right? But I still mainly see the extremes of both sides.
Yeah, I
Like,
see what you're saying now.
you know?
Yeah. Because I do the same thing. I try to find as many people so I can at least feel like I'm doing my best to climb out of whatever echo chamber I'm naturally already in. And when I do, I still only see the outrage tweets and posts. So that's got to be what you're talking about. There is there's something in the algorithm, because this is kind of leading me towards like what are some solutions? Is it, I don't know your thoughts on like human consciousness and collective consciousness, and approaching it from the base level, but you probably have a multi-pronged idea where it's like it can't just be grassroots. It also has to directly address the algorithm and what it is that the algorithms seek and like mainly desire. Like they are on a 24/7 hunt to find the most outrageous, and to know you so well that it knows what would outrage this person. Like I see what makes them like go, ah, I want to know what makes them go, motherfucker, like that's what it seems like the algorithms are really doing. It's just like, okay, what keeps people's attention the most? Outrage and porn, right? You can't show porn on the social media, side. The algorithms are working fine in the rest of the 2/3 of the internet. But then outrage seems to be the number one thing. It gets shared more. It gets, retweeted and reposted more. It gets, again, like you take something that was just maybe semantically the same as somebody said, and then turned into a direct quote, and then requoted, but kind of different. And then it turns into this Frankenstein of something that doesn't even really exist. It's almost like the horrors in our mind manifesting online. And that's all we know, because shit, I even wrote a song about it. I see that guitar back there. I wrote a song called According to the Internet. And like the whole thing is just, it's a beautiful song, but like it's just funny ass lyrics, because the whole thing is about like, everything I know, I only know it and I owe it to the internet. If you can't Google it, it doesn't exist. Don't you get it yet? Like, there is this thing where it's just like, well, I can't find it on Google. I either don't believe it exists anymore or I give up. It's too hard for me to find. And by the way, this will be the last part of the tangent, but if you go to Google and you type anything in and it says 1 billion or 700 million, sources, try to find 700 million sources. You'll get to page 17 and realize it stops there. And everything on those 17 pages is almost verbatim the same copy. And so
shout out to Jimmy Corsetti.
Yeah.
And the dead internet theory. Yeah, Jimmy Corsetti did a video about this recently. I was like,
explain that, please. The dead internet theory I've heard of, but I'd love to hear your thought on that.
Yeah, well, the dead internet theory basically suggests that most of it is all bots and written by AI now, and that the internet is dead. It's no longer being created by humans. It's just bots and AI. And I think there's probably something to be said there.
Yeah, it may not be complete, but it's definitely somewhat true.
Yeah. But to like answer your question about what I think we do, I was very intrigued by Elon's proposal before he actually like got hold of Twitter. I don't know if he's actually going to do this, about basically giving individuals more control over the way in which their timeline would be populated. I think that's definitely an interesting way in which you could really help, because you could. But do you know what the problem is, right? Is that all of these things are so close to the edge in terms of profitability now. Because like, okay, we've had the monstrous like VC boom of like people pouring obscene amounts of money into big tech firms, social media. We've had the people like, I don't know if you've seen the videos where they'll like there was a brilliant one about this like girl, like her like day at LinkedIn. Like she turns up early, sends a few emails, then she goes on and get breakfast, then there'll be like some merch given out to her, then we'll have some meeting about like something completely irrelevant, then it's lunchtime, and then they've got some like thing after lunch that's like makeup, and like they're getting like face masks done, and then there'll be a tiny bit of work, and then they're off to the beach in the evening. It's like the that era is dead now, right? Like they've all died. There is no more like obscene amounts of money being sloshed around in these firms. You see it like the absolute collapse of the stock price of many of these big tech firms. Like all that extra money that was pumped in over the last 5 years, that value that's just evaporated, right? Clearly they're still very valuable, but they're going to be running so close to the edge now in terms of like profitability that they need, it needs to run like that to function. So if I don't know how you do it aside from get people to pay for it. And we watched like this really fucked me off. I think like let me unload here a little bit, right? Because I wrote this book about how bad social media was for politics, about how it was like the most predatory part of it is that we are the product, right? That our data is being sold to like advertisers in order that they can target us as deeply as fucking possible, right? In down to really predatory things like I can't remember the name of the book right now. Yeah, Weapons of Mass Destruction, right?
Yeah.
It's I can't remember the name of the girl who wrote it right now, but like it basically goes through like the ways in which like if someone's searching for depression, all of a sudden like they're going to be pumped with ads for like therapy or like medications and like things that are just jumping on people in their worst moments. Like someone searching for schools that they can afford, they're going to be hit with these like super high priced like colleges that they'll be given like some loan for that will like seem great at first, and then all of a sudden the interest rate kicks in, and like all of these things are so like the predatory nature of them is based on the fact that like social media firms need to gather as much data as possible to sell, that they can charge as much money as possible to advertisers because of the quality of the data that they're able to provide about the customer and user bases. And if you took that away, then they would be less reliant on that, and that would at least like lessen the problem, right? And I watched, especially through the Brexit vote and the Trump vote and all of these things, I watched people, especially on the left, all of whom I agreed with at the time in this instant. I still do. I still agree with exactly what they were saying here, is that this was bad, right? We should not be the product. If you're not paying for something, you're the fucking product, right? And they all ranted and raved about it because they saw the predatory nature of it, right? Because it had been used for something that was like opposed to their worldview. And then this man, Elon Musk, to whom I am indifferent, I think he's a net good for the world, but like I'm not a fucking Elon fanboy, but like I think he's a net good for the world because he done some really cool stuff. Like Tesla, SpaceX, like the Boring Company, the solar roofs thing that he tried to do. Like he's trying to do cool stuff for the future of humanity, and he's probably gonna get some stuff wrong. Fair enough, but I think he's in that good. But anyway, he came along and said, right, okay, I'm gonna try and charge some money for this product that you use endlessly to promote all of your stuff. right? And I'm going to charge you a small amount of money a month to use this. And it was the first time that a social media, this massive social media firm, was finally attempting to escape this paradigm where the users are the product. And the entire left, like all of the like liberal elite journalists, they lost their fucking shit. They were like, this is outrageous. He's charging for free speech. And I was like, you morons. Like, like, shut the fuck up. Like, it's finally, we might have an opportunity to see what this could look like without being the product, without this predatory advertising system that has been used to give you all of these things that you hate. Trump, Brexit, like the theory, like, you know, or at least it definitely didn't fucking hurt those causes. Like, and yet they were so like, I don't know, possessed ideologically that they couldn't admit that this might be a good thing.
What are your thoughts on? Do you think it would have been successful if, even if the charge was a couple cents? I know Facebook was thinking about this at some point, or maybe it was MySpace. Tim Berners-Lee, you know, often, you know, quoted as being the guy who like helped or invented the internet. There, you know, like, which is definitely not true. I mean, this is an ongoing evolution of a technology all the way back to you know, the 40s and the 50s. I forget the guy who wrote cybernetics in the 40s or 50s. But anyway, they've been talking about this concept for a while. But Tim Berners-Lee, I think it was on a TEDx podcast or something like that. There was this one little snippet of him doing an interview, and somebody said, like, well, you know, why didn't you just charge a little bit of money? You know, like, you know, if you would have charged a little bit of money. And he said, I don't think it would have turned into what it was, because there was this university that tried to do the same thing beforehand. And there was just only a few amount of people who were like, I'll pay. Even if it's only a couple cents, there's something about the paywall, even an email wall. If it's not perfectly free and perfectly open, it seems to block a ton of people from wanting to adopt it, even subconsciously. So my thought for you is like, is there another way? And I don't know if you've gone through this thought experiment. Is there another way to get away from the you are the product if it isn't by charging directly to the consumer? Or at least, because I'm looking at that as an obstacle. I love what you're saying about, like, you know, we're the product. I get that. I'm curious if charging is the entry point, or if it's a down the road point, or if it's something that can be a hidden tax. Most people would, you know, they wouldn't say yes to it, but, like, you know, we're charged with hidden taxes all the time. If it just turned into this kind of hidden tax that's just naturally taken out of, you know, I don't know what you think of, like a global reset of economies and stuff like that, but I feel like something's coming. So whatever it looks like in the future, there's probably got to be a way to get us off the you know, we're the prey, and whatever this predatory algorithm is, we're the prey. There's got to be a way where we're not the sustenance for it anymore. Do you think money is the way? Like, charging is the way?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to charge everyone. Like, you leave a free version. Like, there's loads of stuff that I use, right? There's a free version of, right? And then there's loads of stuff that I use that I pay for the premium thing because I need it
I see what
more.
you're saying.
Like,
Yeah.
right, Canva, for example, right? Fantastic, like, graphics editing thing that I use for like thumbnails stuff, right? I'm considering paying for it in order to have more functionality. Free version is great. I'd be happy to pay for it. Like, if I deem it to be a worthwhile investment, right? Or Zoom, right? I pay for the paid version of Zoom because I use that for my podcasts, and I can get longer than 40 minutes to use it, and I'm happy to pay for it. Right?
Yeah.
Podcast hosting. There used to be free podcast hosting out there, or there still is, and you can have a small amount of stuff, and then if you want to use it more, you can have paid versions of it. Like, and the other thing that's been mentioned is like using things like Twitter, for example. They've talked about like further monetization options for creators, and I assume what that's going to take is the form of tips and like Patreon style things. No reason why there can't be like a minuscule tiny fee scraped off of all the donations that pays for it. That would shut up all the people who are suddenly pissed off that they have to pay $8 a month for verification, because they could, if they were creating worthwhile content that the platform or the users of the platform wanted, they would easily accrue enough to pay $8 a month. Like there could be a tiny amount scraped off the top. I think it's just, a bit of fucking innovation. Think slightly differently about it,
Yeah.
That's not aimed at you, man. It's
No,
just
no, no. Actually, what was really nice about what you said was it's the same thing. I'm a film editor and I use Premiere Pro now. I remember before it was a subscriber based thing, and the same thing with Final Cut. And now it's just okay, that's kind of the way that YouTube went when it was this completely open thing, and then now it seems far more curated and homogenized. What it sounds like you're saying, and I totally agree with you now that you said it like that, because back in Tim Berners-Lee's day, he it was probably this yes or no opt-in. You either opt in or you don't. It's yes or no. It's binary. There's no nuance to it. There's no, well, use our free version until you realize this is actually badass. And then there's a tiered level. There's an ecosystem of different ways to engage with it financially, from the low amount to the high amount, tailored to your needs. It's kind of like have it your way. I could totally see that working. It seems like each platform would really just need to dive deeper into what is the ecosystem of engagement you're going to have people like, and that's the onboarding process from the
yeah,
free to the premium. So I totally see that. I kind of want to switch gears right now because I want to make sure we touch upon the GameStop Saga, or it's called
yes.
Over the Moon.
To the moon.
To the
My
moon.
favorite topic in the world.
To the moon, the GameStop Saga. For one, why to the moon? And tell us a little bit about this book.
It's because we're going to the moon, babe. Well, because the price is going to go to the moon. No, I mean, well, I'm still fucking hopeful. I still think it's coming. So basically,
is it still going up? Is the GameStop stock still going up?
the same stuff. Right. Okay. So you mentioned the Eat the Rich documentary on Netflix. If anyone's considering watching it, don't. Fuck them. Like, this is not the story, right? This is so far from the story that you can't even fathom how far it is from the story. So what happened in January of 2021 and through 2020 and then into January in 2021 was that a whole bunch of hedge funds, mainly Citadel Securities, had identified GameStop and a bunch of other companies, but GameStop was the one that really caught the attention of myself and the world, that they decided that the company was fucked through the pandemic. They looked at it and they went, oh, this is a failing company. We're going to short this stock. Basically, what that means is you borrow a share from someone who has one, say like a pension fund, mutual fund, like a brokerage that's holding them on behalf of customers. And you say, okay, I'm going to borrow this share and then I will give it back to you in a week, a month, 12 months, whatever the contract says, with a small fee. And then you borrow the share, you go out into the marketplace, you sell the share immediately with the hope that in the interim period, the price will decline. You can buy the share back at a cheaper price and then give it back. And then you can keep the difference, right? Which is like a very, very fair and reasonable way for the stock market to operate. Because if you can bet on stocks going up, you should be able to bet on them going down. Totally fair, right? Seems fair. However, somewhere in the midst of the utter fuckery that is our modern financial system, people didn't actually have to locate or even borrow the shares. They just had to know where there might be one, right? And then through this ridiculousness, what can happen is you could borrow the share from someone, you could sell it out into the marketplace, someone else can buy it, and then they can then borrow, they can then lend that share out, and you get this ridiculous rehypothecation thing where you can have the same share borrowed and lent out and like an infinite number of times. So the best bit is that we don't actually really know the amount of shares that were shorted in any company in the entire financial system because it's all self-reported and self-regulated. The main regulatory body that looks over all the trades is not the SEC, it's the DTCC, the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation. That is the body that regulates it, and they are made up of all of the people that they're regulating. All the financial institutions that they're regulating make up this institution, right? Self-regulated. All this is self-reported. So we get to January 2021, and the short interest, which is the percentage of shares that are shorted of the company, which is normally like for most in most things like this is maybe 20-30%, right? The numbers in GameStop at some point in January were like above 200% of the company was shorted. So for every share that existed, it was sold short twice or more.
Wow.
Right? So the people on the internet realized this and went, okay, all we have to do is buy enough of this company and refuse to sell it back to them. And eventually they have to close the contract out, at which point we can demand whatever fucking price we want. So then, 27th of January, 2021, Robinhood and a bunch of other brokers decided that they were going to restrict all buying activity on the stock. So the individual investor was just barred from getting involved in the market. The price tanked, and the financial press claimed that this was all over. They said that the short positions had been covered, everything had been closed out, and there was nothing shady going on here whatsoever, and shut up, this isn't happening. So the people on Reddit were skeptical, to say the least. And they dug, and they dug, and they dug, and they literally became the most realistic embodiment of a hive mind that I have ever fucking seen. They were scouring through SEC filings and watching like the trades going in one by one, and they became convinced that the shorts had not covered their positions, that they were hiding it through an innumerable amount of ridiculously complex financial instruments, including things like balancing like call options and put options in order to try and like balance it out. And I can explain roughly what these things, like people say these are, but it's so fucking complex, and it's designed like that on purpose so that we cannot possibly fathom the fuckery and the corruption and the fraud that is fucking going on in the system. So anyway, we get through many months, and people just continue to buy. We just continue to buy this company. And we got to the shareholders meeting in April of 2020, on the 4th of April, 420. Thanks, GameStop. And we saw the number of people that had voted in the shareholders meeting was 100%. That doesn't happen.
Wait a minute.
Exactly.
Say that again. Clear that up.
Okay, so of all of the shares that exist, right, every single person that owns a share of GameStop voted in that meeting. Every single person. And that, can you imagine that? Yeah, exactly, right? So, having spoken to Carl Hagberg, who's like probably one of the world's experts on shareholders' votes, what happens is this is not uncommon, because what happens is the number is often more than 100%, because there are more shares in circulation than should exist, because of this phenomenon that partially because of this phenomenon I've discussed, the naked short selling. So he says they go into their back room and they just start throwing out votes until they get down to a number that's legal and reasonable, and they go, okay, sweet. So the first idea by the community was like, okay, we just have to all vote and we can prove that there's more shares in circulation than exist. And then they just went 100%. Okay, nothing shady to see here. So the people on the internet were like, right, okay, here's what we need to do. We need GameStop to create some sort of way that they can exit the financial system. And then we all need to find a way in order to make that happen. Just like fucking magic, like it was written in the fucking stars, did GameStop decide that they were going to build an NFT marketplace in partnership with a company who have patents for a decentralized blockchain-based stock market and exchange. And then the apes, as they call themselves, discovered this idea called DRS, which is direct registration system. And that means that they, instead of having to buy the shares through a broker and hold them in a brokerage account, can register themselves as the direct owners of the shares. They cut out all of the financial system and they go, we are the owners. So they started to go, okay, if we can register all the shares that we own as a community, we can prove this fraud exists. So right now, these numbers continue to go up and up and up and up and up and up and up, to the point where at the moment, somewhere in the range of 50 to 60% of the free float of a multi-billion-dollar company are directly registered as owned by idiots on the internet. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. They're so determined to escape this fucking fuckery that is the financial system. And there's like, in between everything I've said, there's been so much education. It's a million people waking up to the sheer fucking like ridiculousness that is the financial system. They have like educated themselves beyond belief. I can't, and yeah, you show the price. I mean, the price is irrelevant. What matters is the DRS numbers, and it's. I can't express enough how incredible it has been to watch, because they discovered things about the financial system that should be common knowledge. That like for example, did you know that all of the shares of all of the companies are not held by anyone who has a brokerage account? All of the shares are officially held by this company called Seed & Co, right? Who are technically part of the DTCC. They own all of the shares. When you buy a share through a brokerage, you're buying the IOU. You don't buy the thing. You're buying the IOU for it. They hold fucking everything directly. There it is, 8.9. Yeah. And the best bit about this is why people believe that GameStop have started to build this NFT marketplace in order for them to escape the financial system that exists. The theory goes that once we get to 100% of the shares registered, that GameStop can then tokenize their stock. They can withdraw themselves from the financial system and distribute their stock as an NFT or a fractional NFT. And it would be the most beautiful thing in the world, because then everything is transparent. It is like you can track it, you can watch what happens. It is the complete antithesis of what we see on Wall Street and across the rest of the entire financial system in most of the world. And to watch a million people become educated, passionate, and just determined to at any cost like ensure this transparency, and like to just pursue this for a year and a half while the entire media is screaming, you're wrong, it's over, has been one of the most inspiring and beautiful things I have ever seen. And the best bit about it all, it was all kicked off because all of us saw some fucking hilarious memes on Reddit about how we were going to burn down a hedge fund. Like just middle of the pandemic, bored as fuck, depressed, sitting at home, and it was the most hilarious shit I had ever seen. The idiots on Reddit were going to destroy the financial system, and that's where it all started, was with stupid memes.
Yeah, it's interesting. Memes, in their simplicity, they also, when done right, they strike at the heart of a matter, and with such word economy and a picture that says everything. The interesting thing about what you're saying here is my mind just kept coming back to that. It does seem interesting that it was pretty much the ridiculousness of the financial system, like and totally like shorting a company. I heard about that for a while. The fact that there was organization, because this is what you hear, like grassroots. Yeah, there's so much passion, but there's no organization. Organization has to be planted on them from higher up that pyramid or that ladder. And it was interesting that on a platform, though, on Reddit, with that simple bit of organizations, like give us a virtual like roundtable meeting, and we can do what was done here. And the name of the company was GameStop. The interesting thing is, like, this is a all economics are a financial game. It's a way that you We have human agreements of how money flows, how things are going to operate, and there's several different sectors. There's the government sector, there's the labor sector, there's the investment of the market. And it's just interesting that the game, like what was the branding, the title of GameStop is like, this is where the buck stops. This is where this game stops. And I wouldn't have thought that until you told me.
You couldn't write it, man. You couldn't fucking write it.
No, and what's interesting is, honestly, I didn't know the carry on of the story after Robin Hood. I didn't know where it went from there.
No one does. This is the thing. It's so fascinating, and no one is talking about it. Nobody.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that, like, GameStop. So I'm just gonna hark on that right there. The fact that it's called GameStop, and then what it does is it moves into the NFT space, which is real interesting. So it's this other form of human agreement that's forged online. It's gained a lot of power, and it really is a factor of trust. I'm working on this film right now and really diving into what is money, what is an economic system, and these are psychological phenomena. They're not just things. It's not something that a dictionary can give you the answer and you just go home feeling satisfied. These are human agreements, and those human agreements are malleable. And what's interesting about what GameStop has, or not GameStop, but yes, GameStop, because I feel like they heard the people. They heard the people. They knew they were getting fucked from above, but they felt supported from down below. So they were like, okay, maybe we would have just, gone bankrupt, all went out of business and found another job. But now, actually, let's see if we can use this as kind of like the branding of a revolution, moving in this different direction, new agreements, who has control over the agreement. Because that's the main thing, is like, with these human agreements, there's money, and then there's the economic system. Like, I can't do anything I want with money, and it's a perceived value held in either bits on a computer or paper or metal, but it's still human agreements. So that's the fascinating thing that's just starting to dawn on me now, that I definitely want to hop back into as far as a research thing. Is this happening? This is obviously happening like elsewhere, but this is the one event where it seems like there was a direct chink in the armor. You think of like the movies where the bad guy seems invincible. And then you notice that there's one move that kind of, like, you notice them wince or something like that. It's like, what was that? That was a weakness. This was a hedge fund weakness. You don't imagine that kind of stuff, especially for a company that's about to go out and a bunch of kids on Reddit. Were you a part of the Reddit groups at that time?
Fuck yeah. Like, this it was keeping me amused, man. Like, I was sad and depressed in the pandemic. Like, I was sitting at home, like, I was waiting for my ski season to start, and then this thing popped out. I was spending 8 hours a day scrolling. Like, it was the most fascinating and, like, amazing thing that I had seen in what felt like years. Like, obviously it had been not quite a year, but like, that's what it felt like. And what you said there is like so true, like about it's about trust. Because everyone, like, they hear the word NFT and they think stupid crypto bros. And I need, like, this is not what it is. It's a digital stamp of ownership. That could replace the stock market as a whole. That can replace, and that will be more difficult, obviously, because there's way too much money tied up in it. What I think it will more rapidly replace will be ticketing. Ticketmaster, like, you've seen this fucking shit with Taylor Swift. Yeah. Ticketmaster, like, fuck Ticketmaster. They charge way too much money, right? But, like, imagine if there was a way for, like, someone to just mint all of their, like, tour tickets and then just sell them on a blockchain, like, exchange, like GameStop's NFT market. The gas fees, because the other people, like, so Loopring, that GameStop partnered with to help build their NFT marketplace, the ones with the patent for the decentralized exchange. The other people they partnered with to do it were Immutable X, whose technology has allowed, it means that the gas fees on their marketplace are just fractions of a penny. So imagine, instead of paying like $5-10 processing fee from Ticketmaster, you were paying a quarter of a cent. their entire business model goes out the window.
Yeah. And what's interesting, what you said about the Wall Street, there's so much more money tied up in it. I think
Not just like, actually, this is something that Craig Wright said to me. Dr. Craig Wright, or Satoshi Nakamoto, if one is inclined to believe him. I don't know. But he explained to me something that I was not aware of. It's like about 50% of the global economy is finance.
Yeah. More than that, at least in the United States. Vandana Shiva was talking about that in her Oneness versus 1% book, but more than that. Yeah. And probably that's what is being not just allowed to say, but it's probably more than what's being reported. It's probably far more than what's being reported based upon some of the trickery and manipulations of numbers that you were just telling, like where one share could be borrowed several times over.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and back to the thing about Wall Street, as you said, like it would take a lot more work. It's not about ending Wall Street. It's about forcing the transformation of Wall Street into something that really does suit the masses more than the few. Yeah. And, because like I don't think you're going to kill it, because all those people aren't going to be, what do you call them in the desert? Like, a massive displacement. You're not going to get CEOs from a company living in a cardboard box. They're going to absorb into the system. So what's going to happen with Wall Street and these types of things, I believe, with massive force coming from the grassroots or some other intelligent force, is the forced evolution of it. And that's why I feel like this coming decade, we hear all this stuff about reset, and it's not just World Economic Forum. Resets have happened since before World Economic Forum. But there's this archetypal, ominous cloud hanging over everything finance, everything economic now, which is massive change is hovering above you. Just wait for the first lightning strike. That's what I'm feeling. And so I guess like kind of where I want to like lead this into a culmination of like what, ideally and beautifully, but also very, practically throw in those things as well. Where do you see this headed? Where do you see all of these things inevitably converging?
Well, there's three things to say. First off, this massive amount of money that's sloshing around in Wall Street and the complete financialization of our economies is probably the reason that people are hearkening back to bring it back right to where we started, to hearkening back to the times when that wasn't quite the case. Because we wonder where all of our fucking innovation, time, money, like people work harder and more longer hours than they did in the 60s, and yet we produce what seems like we produce less, or we get less for it. Mm-hmm. It's like I all of this finance, money, capital, power, like everything is just flowing to this financial industry that just seems to suck all the life out of everything. And like Nicholas Shaxson wrote a fantastic book about this, the resource curse, or sorry, the finance curse, where he compares like a large financial sector to like a resource like oil or copper that can completely cripple an economy if you have too much of it. So there's that. And I believe that is going to continue to like stack up until the point where it falls to pieces. And I think that there's a very, very reasonable chance that we are at the point where it might all be about to fall to pieces. Now, a lot of people thought this in 2008, but then what they did was they turned on the fucking money printers. And since 2008, in the UK at least, we have printed £1 trillion and added that to the money supply. I don't know what the figure is in America, but I'm aware that there's some obscene, like it's like something like 80% of all dollars were created in the last decade.
That's right. And it happened doubly since COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like COVID put it on. But before COVID, you can pull one of my interviews up with Christopher Leonard. And he explained to me that in 2019, they were attempting to turn down this money printing, and the economy was just this close to falling to pieces. Mm-hmm. And they had to just they had massive emergency bailouts that they had to put in. You'll find it on my channel if you search Fed Pill. But he basically explained to me that we were that close in 2019, then they had to turn the money printers back on. Then 2020 comes along, pandemic, and okay, you got the excuse to just fucking do it like mad. And then, so what I think is going to happen is this is just going to stack up and stack up and stack up and stack up, and we're going to end up with a ridiculous, horrible, disgusting crash. Like, I believe it's probably going to end up being worse than 2008. Quite a significant amount worse. Unfortunately, it's going to be pain. It's going to be painful, but essentially what I think is going to happen after that is to also like draw back to one of the themes that we discussed right at the start is with the book The Shock Doctrine from Naomi Klein, and her basic thesis is that she compared the ways in which economists were talking about like economies and national economies to the ways in which the scientists who carried out some of the MK Ultra experiments and electroshock therapy she just compared the two, and because they were talking about them in incredibly similar languages, and that if you shock either someone or some economy enough that you can reduce it to a blank state upon which you can do anything. Basically, in times of crisis, people will accept shit that they would never, ever, ever, ever accept otherwise, because they will believe that perhaps that might be the way out of this problem. And I believe what's going to happen is that the economy is going to tank. It's going to be biblical, unfortunately. And I could be wrong, but I mean, there's way too many signals that this is coming. There's the money printing, the inflation, the cost of living. Like they're doing everything possible to try and make energy seemingly as expensive as possible in a time when people just want to feed their family and put petrol in their car. And you know, they can go for their Green New Deal, which would be I'm sure it would be fantastic if we had the technology to roll it out, or if they've actually invested in it. But they haven't. They've just turned off the pipelines and said, go for it. You know, there's no replacement coming for it. And it seems like all of these factors are converging to this crash that's likely coming. And I think there's going to be one of two results from it. Either we're all going to like actually turn around like we should have done in 2008, like Iceland fucking did, and say, okay, let's get to the fucking bottom of this. Like, let's do something about the things that gave us this crisis. The same thing that we should have done in 2008. We should have had a real fucking hard look and gone, we need to do something different. You know, we need to like stop these problems happening again. And that's either going to happen, or we're going to be force-fed these central bank digital currencies in which money will be programmable and you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Of which the Fed is already there. I think 12 countries are looking at doing trial runs.
Currently on a 12-week trial run. The Bank of England were talking about it today. China have been doing it for 2 years. Turkey have just announced it. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is fucking happening.
No, and they're very open. Jerome Powell was sitting there saying we're definitely we're looking at it now. He was saying like we're considering it at first, and now here we go right here. RBI to start CBDC trial run before year end, what it means for stakeholders. And I mean, just the World Economic Forum has really been talking about a reset going from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism. There's this real big conceptual, ideological shift going on economically, or at least the billboards are up, because as you said, when there's destabilization, when people feel like there is a crisis, and not just a crisis, but a polycrisis, meaning many crises converging all at the same time for you as a family. Yeah, you want to feed your kids and you hear people talking this mad game. One of the most primal parts of our psyche is to connect with community of like mind or tribe, right? So you find the people or the numbers that you feel the safest in. And there definitely is all this talk of something big like a CBDC coming. And I don't know, man, like that sounds like the absolute epitome of, instead of correcting some of the issues, of just driving faster into the brick wall. That's kind of what I feel, and it's not even a brick wall. It's really just going to be what it feels like is a continuation of restricting and not just causing people to get poorer, but having oversight over so many things of the human experience that we never would have said yes to. And then more parts of ecology being swallowed by economy, saying like, oh, that was just a part of nature, but now we're going to start commodifying that too. Same thing as like, a forest, turning it into board feet, these types of things. Like, how do we swallow the ecology with our economy? And with big data, we can just keep an eye on absolutely everything. That'll keep us safe. And
Just a quick
go
little
ahead,
reminder
bud.
here: the Atlantic Council is who's also rolling out this central bank digital currency. And for our audience, a lot of people might be familiar, but if you look at the board of directors on the Atlantic Council, it gives you a good sense of the companies and sort of the intent behind this as well, because a lot of times it's always disguised as a sort of Machiavellian, this is for, the good of all. But it's just a key
It's
thing to note the Atlantic Council
Henry
connection.
Kissinger's. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
like you were saying, it's incestuous with these names. In same ways here in the United States, the oversight advisory boards or whatever, like they are ex people from the very companies with very deep ties, not just relationships, but financial ties and asset ties to the very companies that they're overseeing.
Yeah.
So it really is just, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Dunford, it just goes on
Oh,
and on.
former
So
chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There's everyone in there. And do you know what the worst bit is? It's the media as well. Like the fact that that this like class of corporation that will benefit from this has got their teeth so deep and their claws so deep into the media. Like wait for the New York Times fucking think piece on why CBDCs are fantastic.
mm,
They're gonna have it. Like the Washington Post, they'll be all thumbs up for it. Like all these more like the people that endorsed Sam Bankman-Fried, like the absolute crook, and they're still unable to say this guy was a crook. Like
yeah,
they're like, well, he's just in over his head, and it's like, no, he stole money and lied. Like,
yeah.
like
I mean, there's definitely no denying the power. Who was it? Frank Zappa said that the media is really just the entertainment arm of the military industrial complex. Yeah, I mean it's true, even though it's not just the military industrial complex we're talking about here, but it really is just the propaganda arm of power. It's the propaganda arm of power. And I believe that what we're going to start seeing more is likely, um, you could call it an infiltration. That would make it sound conspiratorial, but it's also like the independent media, YouTube influencers, podcasters, but speaking the same exact party line. And we see that it's been existent for quite some time, but I mean, these are things that like I feel like they're just going to happen. I've stopped getting all bent out of shape about it and really just started to take a look at like, okay,
it's not too
what
late
is
for
the
the
point of engagement?
CBDCs, man. It's not too late. This is the thing I need to continue to say to people, right? If we get the left on board, they're done, right? Because the
Mm,
right have already woken up to this shit. They're terrified because they hate the government, right? Fine, great, wonderful. As soon as we get, and I've been trying to say it to every left wing journalist and person I know, is like, do not trust these cunts to control your money. Like, that's the only thing I can say, and they don't. But there's something in their mind that's blocking them, and it goes right back to the tribalism that we were talking about at the start. And we're probably gonna have to finish this because my flatmate is probably gonna be trying to sleep soon, so I'm gonna need to stop ranting. But
uh,
but this goes right back to the tribalism we were talking about at the start. It's like because the right are terrified of CBDCs and digital money as the groundwork for our entire economy, the left seem incapable of also being scared of it
mm,
because they see, oh, well, they're just conspiracy theorists or idiots or things. Like as soon as we get this, this is the biggest one because this is the thing that will divide Like this is the thing that will make the decision about our future in the end. About when I said that this crash is coming, and
Mm-hmm.
the thing that is going to define how we fix it or how we don't is whether we accept this band-aid plaster that you said is like exactly as you said, it's going to drive the car faster into the wall. If we can get the left to say no to this with the same level of like vitriol that the right have, if we can break down the tribalism on this one fucking issue, we will win. That's it. In a nutshell, is like this is literally where it all comes down to. Because from that central bank digital currency, you get the social credit
Social
score, you
credit,
get the
yeah.
programmable money, you get like ultimate control of your day-to-day life and expenditures by the government. And even if you don't believe they're going to do it now, if they have the power, they will. They will do it. They
Yeah,
have
and
demonstrated
social
endlessly that they
credit.
will.
Exactly. Social credit then links into, if you know Alison McDowell's work, she's tracking it back to the smart grid and what's going to allow you to get into your house. What food are you allowed to buy with the
Mm-hmm.
money that you have? Whereas right now you can buy whatever the hell you want. That's not the case where things are headed, and I feel you on this. I feel like we're going to have a follow-up, and I hope the follow-up podcast doesn't happen spontaneously because of an economic event, but who
Oh no.
knows? Who knows? We got like probably a 50-50 chance on that one in the next couple years. So
Yeah.
my man, dude, this was very informative. There's a lot of things that like I thought I knew about, but you dropped some knowledge on me, so I really appreciate that. Um, I want to give the audience a chance to just know a little bit more about how to engage with you. You got your podcast. Tell everybody about what you want them to know about, maybe what's coming up, and yeah, just kind of let them know how to engage with your work.
Yeah, the podcast is the absolute best place to find my stuff. I do 2 episodes a week. I'm about to do number 300 on Friday, so that's going to be really fun. I've got a whole bunch of very, very, very cool people lined up for the next couple of months, and I love to just talk about this sort of stuff, about politics. As we have many, many wild people on there. And yeah, if you want to check out my next book, To the Moon, the GameStop Saga, you can pre-order it now. I'm still writing it. The pre-orders are helping me to fund some of the publishing costs, because I don't want to go with a publisher who's going to demand any sort of editorial rights to it. I want to say exactly what I want to say. And as explicitly as possible. As you may have noticed, I tend to get a little bit free with my language.
I'm glad you didn't hold back.
Yeah. So yeah, you can go to wen-moon.com, spelled W-E-N -moon.com. You can check that out, or just find me at thegist.co.uk, or search The Gist on YouTube. That's the YouTube channel.
Amazing. Yo, Josh, this was great. I really have been appreciating your work. I'm glad we got into this conversation the way we did. It went in several different directions I didn't expect, but I was pleasantly surprised by that. Um, well, holy shit, ladies and gentlemen, Josh Hamilton, you're going to have to check out his work. We have all that content, everything he was saying. We'll have that information in the show notes below. Make sure you check that out. This is definitely deeper than if you're just getting cursory examinations of what's happening in the world right now. There's so much nuance, and that nuance isn't there just to fill your head with information. It really is the nuanced ways in which we can actually engage with the solution. If you just listen to the part we talked about Reddit challenging a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, and the fact that that actually might have caused this kind of shift into the NFT space, signaling a huge change. Just engage with this stuff a little bit more. Use your voice in some way, and definitely listen to the beginning of the podcast when we're talking about like it's the nuanced conversations we could be having about whatever your beliefs are. It's the nuance that you bring to it that show that you're a bit more of a human than just turning into the very same algorithm that's like, well, if the algorithm wants outrage, I guess I'm going to outrage people because that's the only way I can become my influencer. So please take heed to some of these messages. if you want the future of the internet to be more human, you need to bring that humanness out of yourself and feed that into the system. With that being said, I love you all. Thank you for coming back every single week. The podcast that we do, the deeper dives, the exclusive content, the stuff on YouTube with Waking Infinity News. We do all of this for you. Josh Hamilton, all these people that we have on, they're coming to you with their life's work and a message from their heart and their soul because they care and they know that this works if you were to just engage with it. So that's the last thing I'm going to say to you all. We are here every single Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please check it out. Check out Josh Hamilton's work, and I'll catch you all next time on the Ben Stewart Podcast.